Hello! In this video I'm going to show you how you can use a modified Pilates exercise to get into the quite often confusing world of core stability. Now when most people think of core stability, they might conjure up an exercise in their head like a plank, where you're adopting a braced position, and the amount of time you can hold that braced position for would denote how good your core stability is. Like lots of things in the exercise and Pilates world, interpretation and definition comes into this, and that's just one aspect. For sure you need core stability to be able to perform a movement like a plank, but there are many different facets to core stability, and often the fact that there's focus on things like those difficult exercises can really put people off going into that world and actually making the gains which are quite beneficial. So this is where the trusty Swiss ball can come in very handy. If you haven't got one of these, I'll show you a modification at the end with a balance cushion which you can use as well. And as I said, we can use a modified Pilates exercise to really get to the true element of what core stability means and how you can see that, and then critically how you can make the adaptations so that you can improve neuromuscular performance and then try and make gains instead of just making repeat mistakes time after time after time. So we'll get into this exercise, which is going to be a modification of the scissors from the Modified Pilates repertoire. And if you've got the Swiss ball, great. If not, stick around at the end of the video, I'll show you how you can use that balance cushion instead. Now the scissors exercise from classical Pilates is a very difficult exercise which has big straight leg movements, and your legs obviously look like a pair of scissors. The modified versions will make that a little less challenging by bringing the legs into a bent position and bringing the legs to what's known as a tabletop position, and then there are lots of variants from that point. You can perform the scissors in standing, the modified scissors that is, or sitting, and that's what we're going to use in this adaptive technique to really get this window into the world of your core stability. Often things get overcomplicated in the exercise world, and Pilates is no exception to that. We try to get it nice and simple and get you focusing on deconstructed movements for the better goal of functional movement as a package. But if you think about actually what core stability is, it is being able to keep your core stable when there's a destabilizing force at play. And in this case, the Swiss ball works wonders at that. Just by sitting on the thing, you can feel that there's a lack of stability. If you close your eyes, if you're sitting on a Swiss ball and you feel safe to do that, you can feel all the little corrections that your body's making as it deals with that instability. So if we think about our Pilates key elements and sitting nice and neutrally with hips, knees and feet the same width, the crown of the head being pulled towards the ceiling to get that length through the spine, being in a neutral lumbar-pelvic position, we're already accessing some of those subtler elements of core stability just to maintain that. If you brought the heels off the floor and did a kind of modified tiptoe position, the base of support has been reduced, and you can feel as soon as you do that there's corrections happening, and then we could close the eyes to make it even more challenging. But we want to see if there's any asymmetry through our bodies, and that's where the modified scissors comes in. So what I suggest is to bring the feet relatively close together, a little bit closer than neutral to begin with. Cross the arms over your chest, sit up nice and tall, and then very slowly bring one heel off the floor and see if you can peel the rest of the foot to bring that leg just off the floor and then come back down. Now as soon as we bring that leg off the floor, it's like kicking a chair leg out. You're reducing the base of support, and your core stability takes the place of what was supporting physically on the floor. You could then compare and contrast to the other side, sitting up nice and tall, crown of the head leading, so we're fighting gravity, peel that heel, and then bring that foot just off the floor. Now, it doesn't need to be a whopping great lift. A lot of people won't be able to get their knees into that lifted position. So remember, as soon as you feel that foot come off the deck, you are already achieving the goal of accessing your core stability. Now, the closer your feet are together, the narrower the base of support, but critically the less difference in your center of mass. If you bring the feet a little bit wider, the wider they go, the more difficult this exercise becomes. And that's where we use this modified scissors movement to really get the inside I talked about earlier. So a lot of people will find that from this wider stance position, they can bring one leg and they notice it's a bit harder. They notice there's that little correction, but they can still just about do it. However, when they go to the other side, they try and bring that foot up and then they can't quite do it. If you watch my pelvis, there's that little shift. So we're aiming to keep the pelvis like a spirit level when we're sitting on the Swiss ball. You'll find that one side will probably behave itself and you can keep that nice level. And then the other side, once you get to that critical width of the feet, you'll just have that little listing. Now the reason that happens is, as that leg gets lifted, the core stabilizing mechanisms take the place of the leg. If you don't have sufficient control or strength or the correct firing patterns, for want of a better expression, through the muscles which govern that, your body knows that you don't want to, your brain knows you don't want to fall over to that side. And so what it does is shift your center of mass over that remaining pelvis. So it's almost like this side of the pelvis which remains anchored to not just the ball but to the floor, essentially, via that kinetic chain. That's the fulcrum on your seesaw. And if you kick out this side and your body senses you're falling over, it's going to hitch that hip so that you shift your center of mass now over that remaining leg. So that's a very common finding. The mistake people then make is they'll continue this modified exercise and just think, okay, well, as long as I'm keeping the foot off the floor, I'm completing the mission. What we're looking for is that beautiful control so we can keep our core stable with the destabilizing force in place. What to do though if you find that you can't do this? Well, the first option would be to bring the feet back together and get that narrow base of support to try and make the leg lift attainable. But we really want to get to this point where the core stability is just about to be overcome and then give it this little bit of help. So because some people won't be able to even do it with the feet closer together, this is where the counterbalance idea comes in. I've got a little dumbbell here. It's only 1 kilogram, and often that's all that's needed. If you find that when you lift one leg up, you simply can't control that shift of the ball and you feel that ball move, you feel the associated pelvic tilting and the shift of your center of mass, then take the opposite arm from the leg that you're lifting out to the side with this modest weight, like a kilo or bottle of water, a couple of pounds, whatever feels comfortable to hold. And this time, you'll lift that leg up and hopefully you will then be able to keep that pelvis level. And this should make sense following that analogy of the fulcrum or the seesaw. Here's the tipping point, here's the fulcrum rather, and we've got the tipping point either side. So if your core has been overcome, add that little assistance and you should just about be able to offset whatever asymmetry is there, and then you would hold here for something like 15-20 seconds just to try and get some good imprinting of what muscle control is being deployed there. Now, you might not even actually need the weight in your hand. You might find just the weight of your arm acting as a counterbalance does the job. If you're quite big and solid and carry a lot of weight and muscles, bones, soft tissue, you might need a little bit more than this. So it's just a question of experimenting a bit. However, the critical point is, instead of just lifting that leg up and having these aberrant patterns, which then promote the same problem, you are able to elicit beautiful control, your spine is neutral, your core stability is switched on, and gradually you'll find that you might be able to get away with less of that leverage, that counterbalance, to a point where you can come back and then you suddenly find you're symmetrical. How long that takes, it's difficult to say, but you can get nice control elements in your neuromotor function, that connection between mind and body, within a month. There's pretty good evidence to suggest you can get those neuromotor gains within that time frame. But what you want to do is to make sure that you're getting that beautiful control and pattern with or without support, so that your core stabilizing muscles are getting that message to say, this is what we want you to do. We don't want you just juggling around and putting up with second best. And recognizing that any movement in this ball denotes weakness. And your goal in this sort of exercise, when you're using this modified Pilates scissors, which is bringing that leg to tabletop, is pure core stability in its kind of basis form. So you can see that's very, very different from a plank. You don't want to get to a point where you're sweating buckets and holding these unfathomable positions for a really long duration. Just 15-20 seconds at a time. By all means, go a bit further than that if you feel comfortable to, but really working on that notion of pure core stability. Okay, in a moment I'll show you a modification which you can use with a balance cushion, but hopefully that makes sense. Just remember, your aim is always to keep the thing you're sitting on nice and still, and then by definition your core will be stable, you'll be utilising your core stability. So for this modification I've got a simple balance cushion. There's lots of different types of balance cushions available, but that's the basic kind of dimensions which most of them come in. You want it reasonably firm, and this just takes the place of the Swiss ball. So any old chair, balance cushion on top, and then it's pretty much just like we were doing before, where we're perched on top of something which is a little bit unstable, and although it's not going to be as destabilizing as a Swiss ball, I can feel how when that leg comes up, I can feel the little twitching going on in the cushion, and that denotes weakness. Any change in the orientation of that balance cushion, sitting where I am, it gives me that clue as to where the weaknesses lie. Now, because this isn't quite as effective as a Swiss ball, but it's still pretty good, remember you can vary things in lots of different ways. You can take the feet wider, and that will really challenge those core stabilizing mechanisms, and I can again feel that cushion twitching, and your aim is to have that cushion perfectly still. If you don't have one of these, well, maybe you could use the side of your bed if the mattress is firm enough to act as this, or remember right at the beginning I said that if you bring your heels off the floor, that can add further instability because of the lack of base of support. So you could do this modified version with your substitute for a Swiss ball with tiptoes, so that you've only got one ball of the foot remaining on the floor, doing your modified scissors, and you can feel that that's really challenging in that regard. So remember, instability is actually your friend when you're trying to access and get a read on your core stability. And in closing, I think for this kind of initial delve into the world of core stability, you don't really need to have any medical or biological or physiological training to recognize that if you find there's big asymmetry in what you're experiencing with modified scissors, and that one leg is easily liftable with control and the other one just keeps kicking that pelvis all over the place, that's not great when it comes to functional human movement. If you're that asymmetrical in what you're able to deploy to keep these forces at bay when you're doing something controlled like this, imagine what it's going to be when you're out running or playing a sport or hurtling side to side on a tennis court, whatever it might be. It's difficult to say exactly, but we can agree that they're probably not going to be very good in the manifestations of this asymmetrical core deficit which you can expose with this type of exercise. So that's why I love this kind of technique. Introduce instability, get somebody learning how to correct with that counterbalance idea. Works of course exactly the same in this setup as it does the Swiss ball, and then you can make those gains, gradually bringing your counterbalance in until you get to that position of equity where your leg lift, your modified scissors is the same on either side, and you can hold it comfortably for 15-20 seconds on one leg just as well as you can on the other, and at least then you've corrected some of that baseline deficit in those background core stability elements throughout your body. So really great technique. It's a very different take on core stability compared to what a lot of people think, and hopefully you find it as helpful as I do in my day-to-day life. Thanks very much. Enjoy this exercise, it's a good one.